Imagine if that head trash was not there. Who would you be? What if I told you those fears were no longer a problem? What would you do? I'm Stephanie Costello, a mom of 3, wife, and avid mountaineer. Beyond all of these, I am, very much like you, an average person trying to navigate this thing we call life. My goal with this podcast is to bring to light the truth about what intimacy really is. You may smile, feel called out, or learn something new. Either way, you will learn you are in control. This episode is brought to you by Safety in Freedom. Are you struggling to find safety in the freedom you create? Or maybe you're struggling to own your power, embrace who you are, and break free from those toxic patterns? Well, let's help you solve this problem today. Let's figure out what is really happening in your relationships with yourself and others. You can do that for free today at safetyinfreedom.com/call. That is safetyinfreedom.com/call. In addition, if you are looking for support with what we've been talking about in today's episode, I want to encourage you to get our free tools to help you navigate your freedom. You can go now to safetyinfreedom.com to get those resources. If you'd like access to the special resources and all the show notes for this special episode, make sure to visit theintimacykruths.com. Today I have the pleasure of introducing to you Brian Nandy, who is a highly respected psychoanalyst, clinical supervisor, and certified Myers-Briggs personality type trainer, with 20 years of experience helping individuals identifying character strengths with practical solution-focused approaches that align healthier beliefs with their vision of success. Brian is the founder of BN Counseling and Coaching, a group practice that is passionate about helping highly driven professionals find clarity and to revive their passion and purpose. All right. Welcome to the Intimacy Truths podcast, where we have Brian Nandy here to talk to us about your hopeful journey. And I am super excited to have you because your knowledge and experience and expertise just brings so much to, as we were just talking about, together. And so I'm really excited to learn more about you and your journey.
Oh, thank you so much, Stephanie. So what I'll say, the encapsulation of our conversation will be surrounded around, psychoanalysis and psychotherapy, and my personality type from the Myers-Briggs, which is called, the ENFJ. All right, the mentor, the teacher. So how I started with the hopeful journey is that, should I start with that? Like, how did it all begin?
Sure, if that's where you'd like to start, please.
So, I grew up from my younger days, right? In Malaysia, there's primary school and secondary school. So primary school will be up to what we would say over here, 6th grade. 7th grade and above would be considered secondary school. So life was pretty good, but at some point during the recession in the 80s, the family had experienced poverty, and it took such a toll on us, an incredible toll in regards to how much we could eat and what we had to sacrifice, and it happened so quickly in a year. But thankfully, my parents, especially my mother, who is a teacher, and she herself is an outcome of the World War II. So she has this resilient factor in her that is intrinsic, highly developed, that taught us to keep a vision going of a life that we wanted. So the practice of this embracing hope in its power, not from a weak sense or a begging sense of hope, not a hope of despair, but a believing like we are meant to have a better life. There are skills within us that we can develop and that we can individuate, become independent, and take care of ourselves and be greater than our suffering. So it was a daily practice of contrast. How do we live on so little, but stand tall for who we are at the same time? How do we continue to keep marching on and protect our self-esteem even when it's getting assaulted on a daily basis?
Mm.
That was the beginning of my teenage years. So, my teenage years to me was a highly difficult journey and struggle. I always had this vision in my head that I am meant for greatness in a sense, right? I'm meant to live well. I'm meant to thrive. I'm not meant to live in poverty forever. And so in Malaysia, we have a week called English Week where we've got to present in English. And I was reading this one article, and in that article there was this spelling of a word which I did not pronounce, psychologist. I didn't know that the P was silent, so I said psychologist. And my teacher was like, "This is English Week. The P is silent. It's psychologist." I was like, "Oh, so I'm learning something new." But I even at that time I didn't know what psychologist meant, so I had to look up in that time an encyclopedia and a dictionary.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, "Oh." And reading this article, and it was helping teenagers going through a difficult time, divorces and etc. I was like, "Oh, this is what I want to do for the rest of my life." I was 15. But I had no idea of how to get there. Okay, universities were limited. There were only 7 universities in Malaysia, and there's a quota system as to how many could get into it. You've got to after high school. There's 2 more years of school. There are national examinations that define whether you go on or not.
Wow.
And I did not, and it was such a shame to the family. I mean, I could have gone in as a second round for teaching English as a second language. I went to a Catholic school in my primary school years, so English was, something that I spoke, but that wasn't really what I wanted to do. So I ran away, in a sense. I ran away to a place called Club Med. I became a singer. I got my time away and got my head clear, and I was still, this is what I wanted to do. And just in envisioning, right? So the hopeful journey is so dependent on the big pictures we have in our heads. But those pictures can come true only if we believe them. And in our system, there's this thing called the Zeigarnik effect, which is a need for completion. You have a goal, and it will want to complete it. And it happens when we keep wondering, thinking, feeling, believing it. I knew it at the core of my being, in every cell in my body, that this was my calling. But I didn't know how I was going to get there. So at many levels, and as I was growing up and all that, it was just a secret wish that I had. And I felt like that's a calling that I cannot disobey. But because I didn't have the means to do that, when I came back from Club Med, I got scholarships to go to other schools to become an accountant and business, but that wasn't my thing. So I decided to turn them down. And my parents were like, "What are we going to do with this child?" So, because I spoke English, a friend of mine who worked for an advertising agency asked if I'd like to be a copywriter, an English and Malay translator, etc., interpreter and translator. And so I did that. And from that, I made money. I went to school, to a private school, college in advertising. And then there was the American degree program, which a friend of mine had gone into, which is like a county college. But they happened to have an American associates subjects, courses that were offered if we decided to go to America, because Malaysia is a Commonwealth country, so essentially we would go to all the British governed countries. But to go to America, you'd have to have different requirements, etc. So did that, got a scholarship, and just like that, I got an acceptance, and I was going to be on my way to America
All by yourself.
all by myself.
Just a bag.
2 bags.
Hopeful. If there was nothing hopeful about that, then I don't know what is.
Maybe you've seen it in like some movies, right? When I was going to apply to get my student visa at the American embassy, and we were all holding on to the gates. We had to be there like 4 o'clock in the morning because people were already camping out. And I had no money. and they needed a certain amount of money to kind of state that um, if you're going to come to America, then you're really going to go to school. They're not just going to get there and then not work.
Right.
So I had no money, and there had needed to be a certain amount of money in my bank account. So out of this contrast of despair, but like a real determination, I've got to make this work.
Mm.
And I started to borrow money. I started asking people for money, and I don't ask because we grew up with pride. Do not act poor.
Yeah. Okay.
You have, etc. Right? So even though we were only eating rice and just mango for like years and years and years, I couldn't take mangoes anymore. But now I love them. But I asked my boss, and he loaned me like I don't know, like $45,000. Like, here, take it. There was another previous boss. I asked her, and she's like, well, I can give you this money, but I've got all these stocks and shares and a whole bunch of jewelry if you can get it appraised, and hopefully that. And I did all of that.
Wow.
And I saved up some money of my own as well, because in advertising I thrived in the creative world. So with that money, I put it in my bank account. As soon as I got my visa, I returned them. So that I was so nervous if they would. I guess essentially it came up to about 88,000 to somewhere around the US dollars in my bank account.
Good.
Just people lending me money, which I almost had to humble myself to ask that. But I had a good relationship with them, and they trusted me.
They trusted you would be able to get it back.
Plus, they knew where I lived, and I was their boss, and it would be very shameful if I didn't do that.
Yeah.
But I think I'm hoping that while I worked with them, I presented with integrity as best as I could, whatever it is. I just had to be authentic, and this is my word was all I could really offer. So I really had to keep my word. Once I got it, I returned the money, and I got the visa. Getting that visa right was such a defining moment.
Your ticket to freedom.
And to my purpose.
Mm.
I'm actually a biracial. My mom's Chinese, my dad's Indian, and we fall into a very interesting category in Malaysia, and there's certain expectations of us. And my parents were very forward thinking, and they raised us to question popular belief in a sense. So we never really fit or conformed to the norms. Right? I mean, I have interracial parents, and in that inherently we are taught to view the world differently. My parents were also teachers, so we were teaching and to question about the world, etc. And so I never really felt at that time that I fit in Malaysia, and I certainly would not be able to get my degree in psychology at that time. This was about 25 years ago, 26 years ago. Right? So waiting for your turn at the embassy, right? And because the interviews are they're very hot, they're very cold, they're very flat, so you don't know, you can try to be friendly and all that, but it almost like doesn't count for anything, right? So just waiting, and I remember that moment when I received my passport, and in it is an envelope. I opened that envelope, and I got my visa. And it was inserted in one of the pages, which I didn't know it would be in there. I was like, what is this? And I remember walking, because I had to take about 2 or 3 buses to get to the embassy, no car. And I just remember every cell in my body had transformed. And I was just so thankful. I was thanking God. All I could do, that 25-minute out to walk to a bus stop, I just kept thinking, thank you, God, thank you, God, thank you, God. And then I was off my way to America. And it has its own challenges, right? 25 years. But everything that I have desired in my life, everything, I've experienced it and received it or afforded it. So many years later, after September 11, when everything was lights out and all that, and we were nothing else to do except for the radio and trying to figure out what's going on, I decided to come up. Me and my friend decided to come up with a vision board. And I've been doing vision boards in a sense from my younger days about what I want in my life, and they were just simply like words on a paper. I never really did the paper cutting of images and all that kind of stuff. I drew them, anything. And I remember, in 2001, I just graduated from my master's in May, and in September, we had the towers, and I just wrote my list. And right after that, because Malaysia is a Muslim country, now how was I going to get my green card or my citizenship? I was still working for the university. I was trying to get a job in a hospital to be a therapist, and it was really hard, but I was persistent. And after experience, I came to New Jersey with only $73. Nothing, 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 nothing. And I remember, but I was able to get a position as a graduate assistant, where you get to go to school, it's free, and you get a stipend. But there was some paperwork mix up, and I had no money. So I had that $73. I had to be so mindful to not spend. I had no cups, papers, nothing, because now I'm living in a new place. I couldn't afford to pay for the cafeteria package. So I had to, supply myself. So I just drank water from a tap for like a week. And finally I asked the secretaries at the office, like, do you have plates or like cups that, I could use? And they gave me stuff like that. And people in my office, when I told them, like, I've not received my $120 paycheck, and I've got things to pay for. And I remember them just being so protective of me. And Pat Gruich was her name, and she took me and we marched to the whatever office that was in charge of payment for the students, and she advocated for me, and they all gave me some money to buy stuff. I was crying. I had to go to a food pantry before that, to a church. She said, like, I've got no food. Could you give me something? And the priest was going to go, I've got $20. I'm like, thank you. Went to ShopRite. There was ramen noodles, 10 for $1. I was like, let me have all these ramen noodles. Broke it in half, right? Half for lunch, half for dinner.
Yeah, with the stupid packet of sodium. That was like my jam. The best part as a kid was putting butter and cheese in it, and it was just like so good. But I would never eat that again.
Right. Oh my god. But it was so scary, and I remember that one night I could not sleep, and I just wrote all my worries on a piece of paper. Just wrote out in the dark. I said, God, you gotta handle this, because there's no space in here and I just can't figure it out. And then in 2 weeks they were all resolved. So I think even in this morning, right, I received some news and just shook me, and I was like, okay, gotta center yourself again. It took me about like 15 minutes to 20 minutes to like center myself. The storm within, not just center myself, but align myself. Like, remember, what is it that you desire? So the way I've led my life is to be led by my vision, to be led by my dreams, to live from one dream to the next. And dreams do come true. It's just that we've got to execute it. We can't just be sitting and thinking like, oh, let me dream this up and it's gonna appear. Of course it takes effort, right? And it's not like I execute it any faster than others. Some do it really fast, they set their mind and then they get it done. I do take a bit more time because I need all my information before I do stuff. And it depends on what it is. Sometimes you just got to go with your knowing. So that's how the hopeful journey for me has become a way of life, and I'm working on a workbook called that. And essentially, I've taken two different framework. One is the Chinese, right, like feng shui. It's called the bakwa, which is like the 9 areas of a room, and it addresses the 9 areas of life, so to speak, 9 clusters or domains of life. And I've also taken the template of the hero's journey in storytelling. Just used it as certain turning points of what a person has to go through, and taken psychology, psychoanalysis, and given psychology information to back it up. Otherwise, it can feel a little shishy, like what is this to out there, or not even there. It's just non-believable. So I decided to add some psychology to it to give it that backing and the potential and understanding and credibility, really.
Exactly. The credibility is important because, recently, for example, I was in connecting with a coach in the area, in my local area, and their website was marketing was really great. They were using really hot button psychology terms, but when a website uses those hot button psychology terms, it diminishes the importance of the psychology field and psychoanalysis and all the research that's gone into how humans behave and emotional and communication and behavioral health, right? So I definitely appreciate that there's that backing in that psychology, because modern society or average society deserves to hear that, right? They deserve to know that background. It's just once it's out there, people read it and then they think that they're now an expert. And so it can be kind of challenging to help them understand, you can't just wake up one day and be like, I'm a mental health provider, right? Just like you can't wake up one day and be like, I'm a doctor or a physical therapist. There's a reason why education is such an impactful piece to our society. And as information gets more readily available, we want to respect those self-taught learners, right? But at the same time, the self-taught learners, they do have to make sure that they're uh, referring to the right areas and the right people. Know your limits and know what you can provide, so that we can have a collective all of improving people and improving our society and having that tribal leadership, which is one of my favorite topics to be talking about right now. But tell us more about your workbook. Tell us, you started, I kind of cut you off there, but I love just hearing you riff. So the 9 areas of life from Chinese and the hero's journey. How did you make that all come together in a book?
So what I decided to do was to think about the important areas, important stuff that we've got to address in regards to envisioning, right, our lives, and to address different components of it, our attitude towards life, the aspect of forgiveness and apologies as well as stuff that can get in the way of progression, our defenses, right? I may want to move forward. Of course, we will, but there's stuff that's holding us back. Imagine if we were just more free of some of these defenses and belief systems. And it's not and it's transitional and it's transformative, right? And we get better and better and better. It's like a video game, Like sometimes I catch myself like, oh God, haven't I not dealt with this already? It's just that now at a video game at Candy Crush, I guess, now I'm at level 322, which I don't even know what that is, but the difficulty at that level is so different from playing Candy Crush in the level 1 to 10, to figure it out. So it's about refining it, and life is so full of contrasting experiences, right? In psychoanalysis, the term would be called ego syntonic, right? Like living in contrast. And then ego dystonic is trying to be in alignment. And when we're trying to be in alignment and trying to be healthy, it feels highly dysfunctional. The familiar of dysfunction, is what we know, and familiar can feel very healthy, so we go right back into it because it's kept us alive. But when we're trying to develop a new way of being, how we want to show up in the world with new belief systems, it's not ingrained as yet.
Such an incredible point. And something recently that my daughter experienced at school, which is kind of sad, is from a BIPOC child saying to my kiddo, because you have blonde hair, blue eyes, and white skin, you're disgusting. In the second grade, right? And so our kids have obviously never heard anything along those lines. And so she's like, why am I disgusting because I have white skin? And I honestly don't know how to approach this conversation to best educate her and serve the collective all. That's a significant piece of contrast in our society right now. And my husband and I crave and aim for inclusivity and across the board, not just BIPOC individuals, but anyone who has a identity that they believe and enjoy about themselves. We want to promote that inclusivity and eradicate racism. So then now that it's being brought into her childhood, it's like, what do I do? And then how do I teach her what to do, in her environment? So could you give me some examples in your workbook and how that would be helpful?
So one thing about identity reformation, right? However we see ourselves, and identity formation, a parent's perception, assurance, reminder, empowerment, recognition, approval is part of our identity formation. So, the concept of internal locus of control and external locus of control. So what the workbook is about is really about our internal locus of control. We can't control the circumstances out there. We can't control people and how they view us. But we can control how we feel. We can control the habits of our heart and mind. And so what parents can do is to remind them that who they are on the external may not be within their control. They are beautiful just the way they are, even more. So beautiful and so cute that you want to eat them, but you can't do that. But what's even more beautiful is their inner strength. So when we can't control the external, we control the internal, especially our belief systems. When we are hurt, go inward and attend to those hurt parts and take good care of them and put them back together. And then you can go march out into the world again.
Yeah, so powerful, because we were actually, this had been a new thing that just got introduced to us this past week. But prior to, there has been like, that person's my friend and that person's not my friend, and that person said this and that person said that, and like all this, weird stuff, second grade, drama. And we role played, and I said to her, I said, okay, I'm going to be the mean one. She's like, okay. And I was like, and you're going to practice on how to be kind, how to say kind things back. And I said, your mother's stupid. And she's like, oh, you're not stupid. She got so defensive and so mad. I was like, I know I'm not stupid, Peanut, right? But what are you going to say if somebody says that to you? How are you going to remain that kind person and be, I try to be careful because I don't want her to be like, well, I'm bigger and I'm better because I'm not being mean, right? Because that's the same thing, just, in a really a different way. And so I'm trying to help her with like being kind. Well, your hair is ugly. Okay, maybe, but your hair is really pretty, right? I don't want to be your friend. Okay, well, if you change your mind, I'm happy to be your friend,
That's
right?
awesome.
And just kind of trying to embrace it. But she has a really hard time with impulse control. So she's very blunt and honest like me. She's unfortunately got that trait of mine. So when it comes to, is there a next step process where you kind of know that kindness, you kind of, what to say, you have that knowledge and that sense of knowing, but internally that struggle, right? So for her at a 7-year-old level, she knows to be kind, but then to be like, well, why is this person being mean to me, and not having an understanding of the bigger picture of what's going on around us. How do you help her with remain understanding that confidence, and that you're even more beautiful inner strength? Like, how do you get her to believe in that when all the other messages around her, not all, but some of the messages around her are not in alignment with that?
Yeah, I think you can always hear it from your child. But first, I think it's important to know that in the first stage of life, right, there's so many challenges that we are going through, because it's almost necessary for us to experience the difference so that we can be reminded about who we are and who do we want to be. So with every repeated experience, the reminder of you are not that, you are this. This is who you are in your beauty, in your kindness, in your capacity to rise above, to be vulnerable and to be strong at the same time, to get hurt and to be loving, to be hurt but empowered. I think the shifting in our perception and attitude towards life is really key. How good we are at shifting and being mindful about how much emotional intensity of thought to an injury. In essence, how do we learn to not romanticize tragedy?
Oh, true. Wow, that's so powerful. How do we Say that again. Not
How
romance,
is
the
tragedy?
tragedy. Yes, so powerful. And my husband unfortunately heard this before I did, and I hadn't educated him yet on what I've been working on with her with communication. And thankfully, I get to have a conversation with her after school. Apparently, school is going to be, supporting the journey. But I want to say to her, the next time you have the chance to talk to your friend who looks different than you in any way, shape, or form, your skin is beautiful and so is mine, right? You are beautiful and so am I. And really trying to help her embrace that and not feel so tied down to, I think partially, truthfully, mom mistake, having children younger and being diagnosed with PTSD after having children. Her foundational years, 3 to 5, were kind of tough. That was a very tough time for me as a mom. And so she has this very intense need to take care of others, because I was like, you need to take care of your brother, you need to take care of your brother. And, expecting her to be bigger than what she was at her age, which is a common mistake in most parents, especially stay-at-home parents, when we're chasing after everybody else and trying to figure stuff out. And I put like the fear of death in her in some ways, in way more intense than it needed to be at her level, which created a lot of stress. And so now we're kind of working on unwinding that. She has a really hard time when she knows that something is wrong or bad and somebody else is doing it, to not butt in. Well, I need to help them so they don't get in trouble, right? Or to not try to control them. And so, for example, she's so funny. She's like, everybody was asking me if I was okay. Everybody said they missed me. They were all running up and asking me a bunch of questions. So I told them to all get in a line and I'll tell them. I'm like, kid, you can't control the masses. I was like, what? I was like, Melody, if you're overwhelmed, you need to talk about how you're feeling and you need to share. I'm happy to answer your questions, but I'm really overwhelmed. I can't answer too many questions at one time. And so instead of trying to tell them what to do, you need to tell them what you would like to do, and kind of translating that. And is that like a normal 7-year-old thing for people to say, kids to say?
She's grown up.
She's definitely a lot more mature for her age, which is socially challenging for her, because I obviously have such emotionally intelligent conversations. So when she has that intelligence that other kids her age don't, she's like, how do I even communicate and socialize with you?
And
So
globally, right, the oldest child always, that's why when we think of birth order, right?
yeah,
Because there are certain roles that certain, in the birth order that
yes,
the oldest have their own neuroses in that sense, right?
yes.
Responsible.
So tell us more about your book, the workbook, and what would be the founding, like what would be a great way to kind of close the workbook in a summary of, kind of what we've talked about, and how would I summarize this close in this kind of example we've been sticking with?
Yeah, I think what my challenge in life and what the purpose of this book is, how do we, from a sense of experience life in actual poverty, had affected my poverty mindset. That even though and that while I was a problem solving person, I came from a place of lacking, and that's so much energy.
Yes, I was just going to say, poverty mindset for the listeners is not just finances. It's energy, it's spirituality, it's relationships, it's time, it's connections, it's a lack in something in some area of your life that you're feeling and embodying and embracing. And that lack is what's painting the picture for you. And you have the power to change it.
Yeah, I mean, and so the practice has been about abundance, and I have to tell myself, Brian, everything that you've desired, you've experienced, everything, and isn't that abundance? So why not just stick to thinking in abundance, dreaming big, going for it, and just letting go of that old way of being that have kept you alive, where you've got to be calculated about how much money you have, and the hyper budget and planning the whole year and how much of it, and I'm going to graduate in 2 years and not in 4 years. That sense of calculation, I don't need that anymore. It's brought me to a place where I can live in freedom, right? And everything I've done is to be on that path to live light and in calm and in freedom. and in support, that I can be unlimited in what I want to offer, but also recognize when I can't and understand my limitation. And so what this book does is, in a sense, to try and make that shift into an abundant mindset. And the process, just like your child, right? The process of empathize, appreciate, and empower. Empathize with your journey, with your past, respect it, give it honor, remove the shame and regret from it, and then appreciate yourself, practice of it, appreciate your capacity to stay alive and a desire to want to be more, if it can be as basic as that. And then empower. A frightened person makes frightened decisions. A scared person makes scared and afraid decisions. An empowered person makes empowered decisions. So essentially what this book is about is care about how you feel. Our feelings and our thoughts are our fuel. They can drive us or drain us. So when we are lost, we've got to calm the ocean within. We've got to call upon the empowered version of us, the guardian within us, to take care of our frightened little child. Center, rupture and repair. And then the question is, what's the next loving thing to do for me? Or what's the next empowering thing to do for me? Otherwise, there'll be a tendency to want to do for others.
Yes, so freaking powerful. I am so beyond grateful that you have come into my life. Having somebody with your abundance mindset and the tribal leadership, this fifth stage is innocent wonderment. And it talks about our tribes and how our tribes do not compete with each other, that we compete with what's possible and not with other tribes. And believing in what's possible, believing in that connection and that bond and that empowerment, and embracing differences and being confident and excited about those differences. There's just so much that's involved there. And I'm so grateful to be able to have that mutual understanding and belief in our world, because there's so much not that, and that pain is just being perpetuated and perpetuated, and it's the pain is remaining alive, and we want to feel alive in ways that are empowering and not painful. So thank you for being you.
Thank you. I hope I answered your questions.
You did an amazing job. And where can people find your workbook?
Oh, it will soon be on Amazon. I just received the new edits today, and hopefully in about 2 to 3 weeks, but let's set a deadline by the end of the month. It will be on Amazon.com.
Awesome. And so it's called Your Hopeful Journey.
The Hopeful Journey.
The Hopeful Journey. And do you have a website?
Yes, I do. It's bncounseling.com, and we are in the process of creating, we've bought the domain name, hopefuljourney.com.
Yay! So awesome.
Full.
Yes, Hopeful Journey. I love it. I'm so excited. Thank you for being here.
Thank you.